Just make sure that's just going to go through. All right. Good evening, everyone, and afternoon here in Western Australia, and where I'm on Whadjuk Noongar land, and I guess you're on all the other different nations around this beautiful nation. And basically, yes, so I just wanted to acknowledge the elders, past, present and future, of this wonderful nation that's been inhabited for at least 70,000 years, which puts the last few months in lockdown in perspective a little bit, I hope. And I also want to acknowledge Anne Reeve, who is our founder in Australia. She brought Family Connections to Australia in 2015, and she also brought the organisation that many of the people that you're seeing here right now are involved in as volunteers. And we are committed to raising awareness about borderline personality disorder and supporting family, friends and other carers of people who have borderline personality disorder, and you know, attacking the stigma that is around that as well. I'd also like to acknowledge Megan Henderson, who's here observing as Acting Executive Director, and Kylie, who is showing up as Family Connections on that screen, but she's the hard-working administrator. She's a part-time, full-time worker. And if you decide to register for Family Connections, she will be the person that deals with all of that, and she's been working really hard at that for a few years now. And I'd like to introduce my co-panelists. So we've got Denise and Michael. They are, that's it, say hello so that if people have got...
G'day, how are you?
So Denise and Michael have been Family Connections leaders since 2017 and have delivered about 5 groups, and they will say a little bit more about their journey with Family Connections when they talk to their favourite skill. And we have Liz Hodgman, who has been an incredibly hard worker in the BPD community. I don't know how she gets anything done, because she gets everything done for us. And Liz is going to be, she's going to be taking all your questions in the chat. So we're going to present 5 topics today, 5 of our favourite skills. This is not, you know, necessarily anyone else's favourite 5 skills. These are the skills that we as a panel really like and think are incredibly effective. And after we've presented each skill, Liz is going to give us a quick summary of the major questions that came up that are relevant to that skill. The ones that don't get covered by the skills, we will answer at the end of the presentation. And just around treatment and access to treatment, that's another topic that's been covered. It's a huge topic, and it's been covered in Wednesday's webinar. So
Thursday, Jenny.
Thursday. Oh, God. Thank you. See, Liz is a linchpin for us all. And we've got Kirsty Burns, who is also was trained in 2015 along with Liz and me. I wish I'd met you guys at the time. I was over there in Adelaide, but I didn't actually meet you at the time. And Kirsty has delivered, well, Liz has delivered 11 groups, so she's a champion today. And I think you said about 7 groups, wasn't that right?
Yes. Yep.
And is a DBT clinician, does works for SA Health, doing that. And I am, as you would have guessed, I was trained as a Family Connections leader in 2015, and I'm a DBT therapist too. And I think I've done 10 groups. So yeah, so we're and Family Connections is a we don't charge for it, and the vast majority of people who lead it are volunteering. Some people do it through work, but the vast majority is a voluntary role. I think that's it. So I think we'll start with you, Denise and Michael, with your first skill. So would you like me to, I'll share the screen on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just while I'm doing that, can you tell us about how you came across Family Connections and sort of what it did for you as well?
Sure. Well, I'm Michael. I came across Family Connections through our carers group called Sanctuary, which is a great place to find out information that can help you, because you're being with people who are experiencing the same thing as you, of caring for somebody with BPD. For me, Family Connections was absolutely life-changing. Before I did that course, I felt as though I was caught up in an absolute chaos, as if I was playing a game which I had no idea what the rules were or what skills I was supposed to bring to it. I was sort of trapped between being angry and resentful and creeping around my house as though I was walking on eggshells. And so after I did the course, I had a much better understanding and a much more sympathetic understanding of my family member with BPD and of the pain that they were living with on a daily basis. And so what I found was that I became a lot more sympathetic instead of being critical, angry and resentful.
Fantastic. And Denise?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I obviously am a carer and came to Family Connections, again through Sanctuary. And I think we were so impressed with the recommendations that Alan Fusetti got in terms of the training that we went further ahead with it. When we actually did Family Connections, I was really impressed with understanding about how the brain works and in a dysregulated person and how little control they have over this. And that for me was sort of really eye-opening. I was welcoming of the strategies for observing limits as well. And I found out like I was becoming just so exhausted and I was burnt out just with all the family disruption. And I realised I was putting so much effort into actually trying to do things, but I wasn't being very effective. And I think when I saw and heard that in Family Connections about just being, you could be far more effective, that was like really eye-opening for me.
Great. Well, I'll share the screen now. Sorry.
Okay. Are you happy?
Actually, I did, in the intro, I did miss out on explaining what Family Connections was. So if you just want to, or I'll just very quickly say, it's a 12-week program. It is free. It's 2 hours a night. We have been, sorry, I've got to do that, don't I? We have been delivering it mostly face-to-face in Australia, but COVID fast-tracked us bringing it online. So now we do it through Zoom as well. And it's got 6 modules, and these are the things that you can see on your screen right now that we cover. Okay, over to you.
Can I have the screen with the 9 criteria? Thank you. Okay. A skill from Family Connections that's really important to me is the getting to know your BPD person better through psychoeducation. And I simply ask, how can you help them if you don't really understand them? Now, a starting point is to determine which of the 9 criteria that you can see there on your screen are most evident in your BPD person. And then you can try narrowing it down to perhaps just their top 1 or 2.
So for some people, it might be the fear of abandonment. For others, they may be so insecure that they take on personalities to suit their different environments, the chameleon. And for others, it may be reckless or dangerous impulsivity.
So by identifying which criteria most affect your family member, you'll be better prepared to help them. The second aspect I like to look at is their history, their personal history. For some carers that we've shared with, their BPD person was always emotionally sensitive and hard to soothe. But for many, they dramatically changed at a particular or around a certain age. So what happened? Did something happen? Did something happen that could have been traumatic to an emotionally sensitive person?
So examples of this could be death in the family, divorce, a long childhood illness, moving house, moving countries, and this may well not be known to you, but bullying at school or in their neighbourhood.
For some BPD people, they feel that they simply are a poor fit with their family, that they are the black sheep of the family. This is no one's fault, and there is no blame to be allocated. It is simply a reality. The accepted medical opinion is that people aren't born with BPD, but they are born with an emotional vulnerability. It's harmful interactions with the environment that can push vulnerability into mental illness, that is, in our case, into BPD. Now, could we have the slide with Marsha, please? Your BPD person will have 3 characteristics that lead them into emotional dysregulation and, importantly, over which they have no control. The first is that they are emotionally hypersensitive, so that they feel or sense emotional triggers that we may totally be unaware of. I think Marsha's quote there is very apt, that they are the equivalent of 3rd-degree burn patients. They simply have no emotional skin, and even the slightest touch or movement can create immense suffering. They will also have very intense emotional reactions to triggers. That is, they will react quickly and they will react with high intensity. So whatever it is they will feel will be far more emotionally painful or threatening than what it would feel to us. The third aspect is that they have, and I probably need the other slide now, please. Yeah, is that they have a slow return to their emotional baseline. So if you look at the blue line coming down, that's probably the average person. They may have been emotionally aroused, but fortunately for them, they can quickly return to a sort of a neutral emotional place. Unfortunately, the BPD person is the brown line, where it's much harder for them to come down from that heightened emotional state. This means that they're far more likely to be triggered over and over again whilst they're in this heightened emotional state.
A simple example is where your BPD person is feeling stressed by an upcoming social situation. For many days prior, they will be in a heightened emotional state, usually fear and anxiety. Because they can't return to baseline, numerous little scenarios around the home will trigger angry flare-ups that wouldn't usually happen. Someone didn't replace a toilet roll, someone didn't wash their dishes, a piece of clothing can't be found, and you're to blame. This all causes dysregulation.
Okay, a fourth thing that I think you should know is trying to identify their triggers, that is, the circumstances that cause them to go into emotional dysregulation. For example, we do know that BPD people don't handle stress well, so stress is a frequent trigger. Criticism or contradicting their opinions can create an emotional response. Relationship difficulties and its resulting loneliness are profound triggers. Abandonment, rejection, many don't like change, so change is a problem for them, or lack of structure in their days. Milestones are a huge trigger, so birthdays, Christmas, and New Year's Eve.
Through Family Connections and our carers group Sanctuary, we know that Christmas is often disastrous for families that care for a BPD person. Never try and think that you're going to get the gift giving right, because they are really in a heightened state of anxiety. For many, it's the marker of another year of personal failure.
If you can learn these triggers, especially the ones that recur frequently, you can be better prepared to lessen the impact on both yourselves and on your BPD family member. So to sum up, the purpose of the psychoeducation in Family Connections is to provide knowledge that helps you better understand BPD and to deliver strategies and skills that allow you and your BPD family member to have a happier and a more effective relationship. Thank you.
Okay, Liz, so do we have any questions yet, or?
No, we don't. Not about that skill, no. No questions.
Great, okay.
But we might have by the end when people think about it.
I think there were some raised hands. So the people who had raised their hands, if you can pop your questions in the chat panel, then we will endeavour to answer it when we have the little breaks. Okay, so the next skill, you want me to share for this one, don't you, Kirsty?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. So this is a slide that we use in Family Connections, and I just wanted to highlight here, well, I'll read it out first. So the big enemy of relationships is running your brain on autopilot. Mindfulness rewires your brain so autopilot isn't running and ruining your relationships. So I'm starting off with the skill of relationship mindfulness because this really underpins a lot of what we do in Family Connections and just in our everyday interactions with the person with BPD and with everyone else in our lives. So, like I said, I wanted to highlight this quote, is that with mindfulness and all of the skills taught in Family Connections, we're actually rewiring our brains, which is achievable and possible for everyone. It does take practice and patience though, and compassion for ourselves and others. Any behavioural change takes time, that's a fact. We're humans and we take time to learn new behaviours, but it can happen. So I just wanted to give everyone that. So if you could change the slide, Jenny, please. Thank you. So mindfulness has to do with the quality of awareness or the quality of presence that a person brings to everyday living. It's a way of living awake with our eyes wide open. As a set of skills, mindfulness practice is the intentional process of observing, describing, and participating in reality non-judgmentally, in the moment, and with effectiveness. Mindfulness is the act of consciously focusing the mind in the present moment without judgment and without attachment to that moment. When mindful, we are aware in and of the present moment. We can contrast mindfulness with the automatic, habitual, or routine behaviour and activity. And if you can see why mindfulness is important for ourselves and for acting with not only with a person with BPD, but in our other relationships, then there is a capacity for so much more connection, satisfaction, acceptance, and accuracy. So what do we have to do for mindfulness? There's 3 parts to it that I just mentioned before. So the first one is observe. Notice what you're experiencing through your senses. So being your eyes, your ears, your nose, your skin, and your tongue. And remember, what you sense depends on where you focus your attention. So if you're observing your thoughts, but you're talking with a person with BPD, they'll know. If it wasn't observed, then it can't be described. No one has ever observed the thoughts, intentions, or emotions of another person. We can observe with our 5 senses, so what we hear being said with our ears, what we can see with our eyes, like the body language of another, where their hands are, where their arms are their shoulders shrugged, where their eyes are currently looking, how their mouth is there a forehead scrunched up? So remember, just observing through our 5 senses. So once we've observed, we describe. So describing is attaching words to the experience, and describing develops the ability to sort out and discriminate our observations from our impressions to what we actually observe, to actually what is in reality. Confusing our thoughts and observations with the actual event that's taking place can lead to more emotional distress and misunderstanding, which I'm sure you're all very au fait with. Describing is labeling what is observed, just the facts. So I do this exercise in my DBT skills group when we first learn what observation is. So you choose any object in front of you, and for 1 minute you look at it. So you observe it with your 5 senses. And then we have to describe our observations of this object we've chosen back to the rest of the group. So I bring their attention to the judgments that they use to describe it, like, oh, the colour's really pretty, or it's a yucky texture, or it's an ugly shape, and so on. And so I encourage them to describe it exactly how they experience it through their senses. So what's the shape? How big? Is it smooth or rough? Does it smell? Is it cold to touch? So getting them to describe it just as they observe it, because what does pretty mean exactly? It means something to you, but we don't know what it is. It might not be pretty to us. And I like to tell them to pretend that you have to describe it to someone who's on the phone who doesn't know anything about the object at all. So just describing what you've observed with your 5 senses. Then we participate. So the third component of what to do with mindfulness. Participating is entering wholly into an activity with awareness, non-judgmentally and in the present moment. Involving yourself in the moment with your relative or with what you're currently doing. When I'm with my son, who's 14 months old, and I find my mind wandering elsewhere, so I'm thinking about the home, what housework needs to be done, what we're having for dinner, etc., etc. I remind myself to come back to the moment and be present with him in this moment in time. And then I find that my enjoyment of my son increases because I'm fully present, and he actually notices and picks up on this as well. So if you could please change, Jenny, thanks. So we've just been through what to do. These are the 3 components of how to do it, which I've mentioned a little bit as well. This first one I think is so important to do and so important to get. So non-judgmentally, let go of should, shouldn'ts, this is right, this is wrong, that was good, that was bad. Judgments are emotionally loaded and they create polarization and division. Judging is different from discerning. So discerning is about distinguishing what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And there's no personal opinions, just looking at the facts. So judgments are when we attach and create a meaning to them that otherwise isn't there, but it's kind of created in our head. Then one mindfully is only paying attention to the other person or to the relationship in the here and the now. One mindfully is sustained attention on the present moment, which develops our concentration. This skill is obviously easier when you're interested in something, and it's much harder when you're not. So being one mindful if you really enjoy painting can be really easy to do, but if we're doing the housework or washing the dishes, it can be more difficult to be one mindful doing that. So when you're doing something that you totally love, focusing on it wholeheartedly is easy, but obviously it's more difficult. So to try and be more one mindful when we're doing something that we don't necessarily enjoy. And effectively, so Denise mentioned this as well, effectively. This is basically doing what's needed in any particular moment and situation. So it's doing what is needed. So what's the most effective thing to do right now? And it's the opposite of having to be right. It's playing the game, so to speak, giving up being right, even if you believe that you're right. And I think, like for me, I use it in my everyday life. So to help keep you in check, you can ask yourself, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective? And I think this question alone, and when you can answer it honestly to yourself, can be so useful. Next slide, please. Okay, so the key to relationship mindfulness is to be non-judgmental. This means to see things just as they are, no blame, no assumptions, opinions, no interpretations. But if there is interpretations, they should be benign, which means kind, with genuine curiosity. We all tend to jump to judgments about others, like we might think we know what the person with BPD actually means, what you think they're really doing, what's the motivation behind their words or their actions. You know, if they could just see it from my way, and the list goes on. But this isn't useful, it's harmful. Judgments are toxic to our own well-being and toxic to our relationships. They make us more escalated and add on unnecessary pain and suffering on top of what might already been going on, or even adding pain and suffering where it doesn't have to be. Don't impose your opinion onto the situation, onto the event or the person, or assess things as good or bad, right or wrong. No judgments, no opinions, just the facts. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll read this out. So between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So this is from Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor and remains best known for his 1946 Man's Search for Meaning. This is a reflection on what the gruesome experience of Auschwitz taught him about the primary purpose of life, the quest for meaning, which sustained those people who survived the Holocaust. For Frankl, meaning came from three possible sources: purpose for work, love, and the courage in the face of difficulty. So I think this quote is such a beautiful way to say that we have a choice. We all have the power to choose and not get caught up in the situation at hand. There is always a space between what happens, be it internally or externally, and how we choose to respond. So there's always a space between what happens and then what we choose to do. We don't need to get caught up in our automatic responses and reactions. We can put a change to that, and we have the power. We can lose sight of our long-term goals when we're caught up in the moment. So try to stay mindful of your relationship goals when interacting with a person with BPD. Next slide, thanks. So nearly done. These are some ways that you can practice relationship mindfulness. I'll start with the bathroom one. So the bathroom mindfulness. So if you're in a situation and you're feeling stuck, so say with a person with BPD, and you're feeling stuck and you're not quite sure where to go from here, what to do, you're feeling dysregulated and heightened. It's okay to just say to the person, I really want to come back to this and talk about it, but I just need a moment to use the bathroom. So you can use this time when you're in the bathroom to take a deep breath and figure out what you want to do. So remember there's a space and you have choice within that space. Use the components of mindfulness. So observe what's happening inside of you. What are your thoughts? Observe what's happening externally. Describe this to yourself with just the facts and keeping in mind non-judgmentally and what's going on. Is it effective? Or my next choice here after this space, is it going to be effective? And remember that question that I said you can ask yourself is, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective? I think that's so useful. And then the other one is with a blackboard, don't make assumptions. So what's useful is you can practice noticing when you disagree with another person. So when you disagree with a person with BPD, and note what happens when you let go of any judgments, any assumptions or beliefs, and then notice your new reactions. Notice how this feels for you. Not only can you ask yourself that question I asked before, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective? You can also remind yourself of the assumptions of family connections, which is something we teach in the first module. In particular, the assumption that there is no absolute truth and everyone is doing the best that they can. This can really help to alleviate those tendencies to make judgments and beliefs in absolute truths, mostly our own truths. And thank you. So I'm done.
Yep, so I'm just going to stop the screen share so that we can see everyone, and I'm going to, if panelists can unmute themselves, unmute, and I'll get your videos going again. Liz, you'll need to start your video. I'm sorry, because I'm working blind. I don't know what is being recorded of my screen, and I'm terrified that I'm trying to access things and they're suddenly popping up on the screen, but I don't think they are. Yes, so Liz.
Okay, we've got a few questions. So Kat wanted to know, would you be able to provide an example of describing something you have observed in relation to an example of something that might happen with a BPD person? So I think that's for you, Kirsty.
Or anyone else,
Yeah.
if they want to answer.
Yes.
I think one of the things about that is that people feel that, you know, you start to have a fight in the family, say, you know, it might be what Denise and Michael described before around, I can't find my stuff, you know, when you do the washing, you always hide my stuff afterwards, blah, blah, blah. And you make an assumption about, oh, here we go again, she's always making mountains out of molehills. And so you have less patience, you have less space to respond. Does that sort of make...
And so then you can describe, so the toilet roll's not, you know, they come out and everything's, you know, this is the worst thing ever. So you can describe what you see. I can see you're upset, you know, and what you're sent, you know, all you can go with is what you're listening to, you know, what's coming through my ears, what am I seeing? So just describing just the facts, not like Jenny was saying, oh, here she goes again, like making these assumptions. But also remember, no one's ever observed anyone else's thoughts or their emotions. We can make a guess. We can say, oh, I can see you're upset. And they might say, I'm not upset, you know, I'm enraged or whatever, but at least you're making a guess with what you can observe, what you're observing with your senses.
Another example that
I think with what we were saying before, as you know your person better, you're probably going to make the observation that they're highly stressed. Something, probably not the toilet roll, something has made them stressed. And so you don't react then to what they're angry about. You try and think through or discuss later on what it is that has stressed them.
And another example might be in you not reacting to something. So one example we use in our group is of teenage daughter, say, has a really messy bedroom. There's stuff all over the floor, and you come in and it just really annoys you, and you say, your room's a disgusting mess. Well, that's not describing what you see, because a mess to one person is not the same for another person. So what you could say, there are things all over the floor in your room, which is describing. It's not attributing blame, it's stating a fact that can't be disputed. So that's keeping you from making a judgment. Yeah. There's another question. This is to you, Kirsty. Kirsty, is this information regarding a conversation with someone living with a BPD or something else?
Sorry.
I'm not sure exactly which bit of conversation that applies to.
I mean, and like with these skills, I think they're useful in all relationships, in all interpersonal interactions. I use them a lot with my husband. I use them a lot with other people, with my mother-in-law. She's not on tonight. So, you know, I think it doesn't matter. And I do use, you know, with the person with BPD, but with anyone and everyone, with ourselves as well. You know, not having judgments about ourselves, about our experience or our thoughts, just noticing them. Oh, I've had a thought. I've had a judgmental thought about myself that I'm no good. You know, noticing that it's a thought and separating yourself from the thought and from the fact. Having a thought, having an emotion, doesn't mean that it's a fact. We've got it, we've had it, but it doesn't mean that it's a fact about the world.
Also, can I just add the observe, describe, participate stops you leaping. If you actually do that, it will stop you leaping in emotionally, perhaps in a way that you have previously, and that would initiate a confrontation which you actually want to avoid.
Okay, Jessie's got a question which I'm going to answer with my next skill. So shall we move on? Because I'm conscious of time. There was a question asked in the Q&A and I hit the wrong button and I wasn't sure how to answer it. So I've answered it in the chat and I've answered it in the Q&A now. So we'll get there. I just need to get this on my slide. So my top skill is validation. I love validation with a passion, because it was the first skill that I came across. So when I was studying counselling, I did an assignment on groups and families and came across family connections as in a research paper. And I had a friend who was often emotionally dysregulated. And I would get into the biggest fights with her because I get so caught on the content. And then I read about this thing called validation and I tried it with her and I felt so fake and it worked and I couldn't believe it. And then doing the family connections training and realizing that this is what we had been talking about, what I've been using with her, and it's a skill that I try and get people to use right from the very beginning. So the thing about validation is, the question was, what do you do if the other person just wants you to agree with them? That might be validating, but it might not be too, because if you're not believing them, if you're not agreeing, then you're not going to come across as authentic and validating. But what you can validate is you can say, I can see that this is really important to you and you want me to agree with you. Or not even and I want you to agree with me. It's just you go to the emotion. So one of the mindfulness skills that we teach in this program is something called Wise Mind. And that's when you're drawing on the emotions that are happening and on your rational mind and, the sort of describing what you're observing and so on, and brought together in a nice little Venn diagram. That's Wise Mind. And in Wise Mind, you can sort of listen to what the person's saying and think, what is the emotion that's being presented here? And that's what you try to validate. Sorry, I'm driving. As soon as I start sharing screen, I become completely blind. So these are examples of the things that you can validate. Feelings or emotions is the go-to. This gets complicated with someone with BPD because there's another thing that we teach, which is that we have primary and secondary emotions. So often, an example of a primary and a secondary emotion is, when you're driving along and someone pulls out in front of you, you have to slam the brakes on, they sort of toddle away, not having seen you or anything, and you want to call them names. And you're angry. Now, is anger the primary emotion in that circumstance? Or is it something else? And even if it's only there for a little flash and you haven't been doing Viktor Frankl's thing of expanding the response, the first emotion that I would feel in that circumstance would be fear. Oh my God, I'm going to hit them. I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to hurt my car. I'm going to hurt myself. Even for that flash of a moment. And then fear is an uncomfortable thing to feel. So we very quickly go to anger or not, with lots and lots of mindfulness training, you might go to relief. Oh, okay. Nobody got hurt. There was no connection. That's all okay. I hope that person gets to work safely. So the tricky thing about validating an emotion is to know which emotion is the original emotion. So, if you're being presented with a lot of anger, is it actually anger or is it fear? You know, is it shame? Are they embarrassed that they're late? And so instead of saying, oh, you know, Mum, I'm running late, can you help me? It's, you didn't wake me up. Why didn't you get me out the door earlier? And, you know, you don't want to validate the anger there. You want to validate the fact that, oh, honey, I can see you're really stressed about getting to this thing on time, and yelling at me is not going to encourage me to help you here. You know, it can be, sorry, I keep clicking on next points. It can be the legitimacy of wanting something, you know, they might not have any money, but they really want to decorate their apartment. And you're going, well, you've got more important things to pay for, like bills and stuff like that. You're kind of caught up in rational mind. So, but it's actually valid to want to decorate. It's valid to want to live in a nice space. It's not valid that it's maybe not realistic that they get the money to do that. Yeah, and so on. So this is something that, I mean, I could go through each of these things, but I'm sure you've read through them all already, and I am conscious of time. And we do spend a whole module, so a whole 2 weeks on validation, because it does require a lot of practice. And it is usually met with a lot of skepticism when we're delivering this course, but it really is a superpower. It just takes the sting out of what is going on. You know, if you can look at what emotion is being presented, if you can use your mindfulness skills and look at what is being presented to you, try to validate it. If the validation doesn't land, ask for help to understand what's going on for them right now. Okay. And what else? And so for when you're trying to validate, and the other thing I always say is, don't try and validate first with your person with BPD, because, you know, that's like trying to run a marathon after you've run around the block once. Try it with people around you. Everybody thrives on being validated. We all need to be validated. We need to validate ourselves. So practice on someone who is important to you, that you do, you know, have little disagreements with or whatever. And as you get more confident with it, please try it with the person in your life who's struggling with emotional dysregulation. What else? And validation is not always about saying the right thing. I must admit, I'm a words person, so I kind of focus on that. It is giving someone your full attention. So it isn't very validating for someone to say, oh yeah, I don't know if you can see me on the screen or not, but, you know, I've got a phone up, you know. No, that's really important to me that you're saying that. Oh, I'm just scrolling through my Instagram here. You know, that is not validating. So validation is giving someone your whole attention. It is not trying to multitask. And even, you know, if there's a big disagreement happening between you, or there's beginning of what could be a big disagreement, and you're trying to get the dishes done before you go to work, just stop doing the dishes and give that person your attention for 30 seconds, and you will achieve more in those 30 seconds than in the 5 minutes that you tried to do the dishes, as well as trying to listen to what they were saying about what's happening at school and how they hate everybody. Okay. These are 3 little things that you can have on your fridge. I know, of course, and me too. And again, this is described much better during the course. I'm just super conscious of time. But if you can start with these things. So, you know, of course, you know, it might be something like, I don't know, I really want to have a great job by the time I'm 25 and buy a new house and all of that. Well, of course you'd want to have a great house. That you can validate. You can validate the, you know, the desire to have great achievements, and you don't have to get into the, is this achievable by 25? Or I know this is important to you. You know, I know it can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but if you can start, if you think of these as sort of conversation starters, the Me Too one, you know, I hate that we fight all the time. Yeah, me too. I hate that we fight all the time. So yeah, these are the little ones. So I'm going to stop share because validation is usually a hot topic, and I'm going to assume that come back to us panelists so that we can help me out here. Come back, Kirsty. So what do we got, Liz?
What do you do after you validate and the argument continues with the same argument over and over again?
Denise and Michael, you've got lived experience of this.
Well, part of validation is sometimes to not say anything more and to possibly separate yourself from the situation. And if it's something that recurs over and over again, you can, in quiet time, actually try and work out a constructive way of dealing with whatever that recurring issue is.
The very fact that because the argument's continuing is the exact time when you wouldn't be continuing the argument, because it's probably not really getting anywhere. You know, it is maybe the time to ask for a bit of time out, that it's uncomfortable, and maybe some time out, because if it is, and it does get heightened, it's just, it becomes too stressful. Yeah, it's just not an appropriate maybe time. I think you have to validate. You have to validate that they are, it's obviously...
They're upset.
Yeah, you're upset, and I can see that, you know, you're really worried about this particular thing, but maybe right now we're not getting a resolution, so maybe we could come back to it. Yeah.
In Family Connections, we say that sometimes you have to come back for a serious and rational and reasonable discussion at a calmer time later on.
Yeah.
Can I just say, from my experience, those who know me will know that my son and I were estranged for 8 years, and things were really, really bad before we were estranged. And obviously, while we were estranged, there wasn't any real communication happening. And through a family crisis, we reconnected. And I, in the meantime, had done Family Connections and had been running some groups, and I was able to put all those skills into practice. And it was truly like a miracle, because all I really did was listen really mindfully and validate. And it just brought the temperature of everything down, and he was astounded. And we have a terrific relationship now. So I can just say it really works. Try it. There's another comment here, question. I get caught up with too much honesty sometimes. How are you going to work long term? How are you going to sustain your lifestyle? Maybe not such a good idea.
Well, I do get into, when I do my presentation, it is about observing your limits. And so I think that some of that might be answered in a bit of my presentation in terms of
Sure.
maybe too much honesty. Yeah.
And another one, how can we calm when they are anger over their past childhood and get very emotional? So I think it means, how can we be calm as carers when they get so angry? Well, I can just speak from experience that my son was incredibly angry with me, and it just worked. Listening and validating is just so powerful. I'm with Jenny, it's my favourite skill, validating. Yep, it works.
Yeah, and I think it's because one of the kicks I get out of delivering Family Connections is everyone comes in skeptical on that one. And I know my own experience with my own person was this you know, feels fake. It's almost, it's you know, like I can, an example of the first time I used it and it really worked, and it was really hard for me, was somebody in her life had a child who was gravely ill, and she was in a big secondary emotion of being distressed about them not being available to soothe her concern about their child being gravely ill. And I want to go logical. I want to go, oh, for God's sake, you know, these are parents. What are you going to do? And I just went, oh, that sounds really tough. And felt fake. I know, da, 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 da. And she goes on, right, that sounds like you're really hurting around that. And I just kept going to, what can I validate in this emotion? What is happening for her in this moment? Don't try and solve the problem. And trust me, I wanted to solve the problem, but I just kept going. And eventually she calmed down and got to the point where I could say, how do you think it is for them? Oh God, it must be awful for them. Yeah, they might not have a lot of capacity for you right now. And that message, I had to listen to 10, 15 minutes of stuff that I didn't agree with, but I could not get, she was in pain and she wasn't expressing it accurately, which is a big BPD thing, to not express what is going on for them accurately. She wasn't communicating her pain. So I was able to meet her pain, meet her pain, meet her pain, meet her pain until her pain was less. And then I could deliver something that might help her relationship with those other people.
We do have a few more questions. Keeps moving. As a parent, you do, well, this is a comment, but it's really also something I think we can comment on. As a parent, you do get defensive when you're always defending your parenting. And for me, I think the thing is to let go of trying to defend. You just, if you validate their emotion, it'll bring the temperature down. But if you can also let go of trying to defend yourself, because that isn't productive. Just doesn't help the other person at all. Can you please elaborate on the childhood anger?
Not sure what that means.
Not sure what.
A lot of people are saying, how can you validate when they're basically saying, I guess, blaming the parent for what happened in their childhood. And that's a theme that's emerging in the chat as I'm looking at this.
One that says, how do we explain to younger siblings about a BPD sibling's behaviour, and how do we discipline and set boundaries? Well, the set boundaries is coming, but one I have, my son has a daughter, and we explained to her that if you break your arm, you can see it. You know something's wrong. But your daddy, he's got something wrong inside his head, which you can't see. And that's making this behaviour happen. And that was enough for her to understand. She couldn't see it, but there was an illness there.
Yeah. Okay, so should we go to the next one and then we can get back to more questions? Or is there something that's urgent there? Yep. Okay. So I'll start sharing again. Sorry, as soon as I share screen, everything goes blind for me. If I look at the chat or anything like that, it's not showing up on the screen for you guys, is it? No, good. Come on. Radical acceptance. This is you, Kirsty.
This is a big one. I got the big ones. Okay. So, this is a big skill. It takes time to get. Even the concept of radical acceptance can seem difficult. So just be kind to yourself. This is just a snippet as well. So try to recall a time in your life when you accepted something totally. Like you may have lost something really important and special to you, lost someone you loved who died or left. You didn't get something that you really wanted, like a job, a house, a course you really wanted to get into. Try and go back in time to the point right before that event happened. Then go through the period that you weren't accepting, that you were resisting the reality of the situation, and then think back to the time that you did accept. This time that you did accept could have taken minutes, it could have taken days, weeks, or even years, but eventually you got there. Most people have had this experience. When you accept, even though you might still experience emotions like sadness, grief, hurt, disappointment, when you think back, you actually have freed yourself to move on. And when we look back It doesn't mean that it still doesn't hurt. We can look back and say, you know what, that was hard, that sucked, and I didn't like any minute of it, but it happened, and now I can accept that it happened because it wasn't any other way. That was the reality at the time. And I need to stress that radical acceptance is not approving, it's not agreeing, it's not placating, it's not giving up, it's not working for change, okay? It's not just throwing everything up in the air and, you know, this is it, I don't have to do anything to change. The radical part of radical acceptance refers to completely and totally accepting with our mind, body and spirit that we can't currently change the present facts even if we don't like them. Radical means all the way, complete and total. So you've got radical acceptance or acceptance. So we could accept something. I accept that I didn't get that job. But in our mind, we could be like, yeah, well, the other person wasn't that qualified. I should have got it. I don't know why I didn't get it. Radical acceptance is that, okay, I didn't get the job. I've got a couple more examples as well. So it's accepting reality as it is in this very moment, not the way you want it to be or believe it should be. And it's not saying that we can't still work for change, because of course we can. But in order to make any changes about anything, we need to acknowledge the current situation that we're in first. So if I broke my leg and I denied that I broke my leg because I was a famous ballet dancer, and this would have huge ramifications on my dancing career, so I try to ignore the broken leg and I continue to dance on it. I try to ignore the pain, but I can only do this for so long. I can take strong painkillers, but even then the pain's always there. I've just dulled it temporarily. I'm likely to do even more damage to my leg and my dancing career. But if I radically accept that I've broken my leg and acknowledge that while I'm, so disappointed, angry, scared, frustrated, in order to help myself, I need to acknowledge that it happened before I cause myself more damage. So there's an equation at the bottom of this slide. So pain plus non-acceptance equals pain plus suffering. Or pain plus radical acceptance equals pain still, and the possibility of moving forward. So this is something that we highlight in Family Connections, but it also in DBT. So if you take my example of being a ballet dancer with a broken leg, I'm still going to experience the pain. That's something that we can't ever avoid in life. We all experience pain. It's a part of being a human being. But if I don't accept, which is the first equation, I'm adding onto the suffering as well. If I accept the broken leg, so the second equation, so if I've accepted that I've broken it and I'm not going to take strong painkillers because I keep dancing on it because I'm not going to acknowledge that I've broken it, I still experience pain because it's broken, but I'm going to make the decisions needed to get my leg seen to. So I might go to hospital, see the doctor, rest, recover, and help myself heal. So radical acceptance acts as a buffer from further pain, which is the pain that we place usually on top of it ourselves by not accepting reality. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this picture summarizes radical acceptance for me so well. So both situations are the same. It's raining, but the difference is in the way that it's interpreted by us. So the left side, which is the non-acceptance side, says, I don't like the rain. I wish it wasn't raining. My day's ruined. Every day's like this. Why does it always rain when I want it to be sunny, etc., etc. And the right side is, it's raining. That's acceptance. That's radical acceptance. So on my, and I'm nearly finished, Jenny. Sorry, I know we're quick for time. On my wedding day, actually, it was forecast for rain and we were getting married in the Botanical Gardens. Now, I could have made no plans at all for backup and just cross my fingers and hope for the best. but in the event that it did rain, I had a backup plan. So if it did actually rain, how useful would it have been for me to keep thinking about how unfair it was, how it shouldn't be this way, how unlucky we were, why did this happen to me? You know, I could go on, but that wouldn't have helped at all. And it wouldn't have changed the fact that it was raining. And instead of problem solving and coming back to the reality that I was getting married on that day, I would have been so consumed by my thoughts that this is the added suffering that I was adding to it. So are we going to accept that it's raining and then problem solve? Or are we going to fight that it's raining even when there's absolutely nothing I can do about it? So radical acceptance helps us to accept ourselves, others, the current situation and circumstances, at the same time still working for change. And the last slide, thanks. So radical acceptance takes time and it takes practice. So just another thing I wanted to add about time is, implementing new skills and concepts. We need to be patient, kind with ourselves, the person with BPD. Applying new ways of responding to the person with BPD and learning new skills can definitely make changes, and quite quickly for some, but this isn't true for everyone. If there isn't the change you were hoping for or the improvement you're seeking, take the skill of radical acceptance and acknowledge that while this is frustrating, disappointing, painful, exhausting, etc., at this very moment in time, reality is exactly as it is in this moment. Changes in behaviour take time. That's true for the person with BPD, it's true for us, it's true for everyone around us. But remember, everyone's doing the best that they can in this very moment. Once we make changes, according to the transactional model, it will have an effect on the person with BPD, but just how much effect it has and how long it will take for each individual is unknown. So I ask you, start with small acts of radical acceptance every day, and this can help us for the bigger ticket items and to help you practice what radical acceptance actually entails, because it's not easy. So some ways you can do this is if you're stuck in traffic, you're getting all the red lights and you're running late, practice radically accepting that reality as it is in this moment and just sitting with this fact. Notice when your mind goes to, okay, I can accept that I'm in traffic, but I should have left early, or if that slow truck wasn't in front of me, I would have made that set of lights. Your brain will do that, and that's normal. But be aware of these thoughts, these judgments, interpretation, and just sit with the reality of what is right now. So what's in front of us, not what we want it to be, wish it to be, hope for it to be, longed for, worked hard for. Radically accepting with your whole being that it just is. It's a big one, but I'm finished. So is there any questions? I'm sure there would be.
Oh, sorry, I'm typing. There are lots of situational questions. There was one, what happens if a person almost always takes validation as, that's validation, sorry.
I answered a couple in the Q&As.
Yeah. So there's one, I have been really trying that approach, and this may still be the validation approach too. I'm interested in doing a course for my own survival. I would love for my daughter to do a similar course, but she does not accept that she has BPD because of the stigma. She has a severe eating disorder and a shopping addiction, hoarding disorder, but a lot of her other behaviours make me think her profile fits BPD. It doesn't really matter about the label. So just need to say here that Family Connections is for carers. It's not for people with BPD, but it's based on DBT skills, dialectical behaviour therapy. So if your person with BPD was to do a DBT program, you'd be learning similar skills. It doesn't quite answer that question.
I think that my experience of working in a carer agency was that many people that came to the Family Connections groups, their person wasn't getting any kind of counselling at all, but parents or family members modelling help-seeking behaviour and then changing their behaviour as a result of learning, modelled that change is possible. And, you know, if you think someone's sitting in a place of a deep sense of a fear of rejection because of their fear of abandonment, then, you know, risking something like a course and failing it is huge. So if you can show that it can be done, you might find that your person seeks help. And Liz's story is that she didn't even have contact with her son, and she went off and did Family Connections, and somehow the relationship healed.
There are no specific questions on radical acceptance, but do you want me to bring up a couple of others or leave them till the end, Jenny?
We've only got 20 minutes, so let's do observing our limits and then go to the end, I think. Sorry, I will share screen, Denise, for you.
Okay. We're going to have a look at identifying your limits and observing when they are being challenged. So is your loved one intentionally behaving in a certain way that's pushing at your limits, or is the situation sort of the normal accidents of life? And the circumstances really do matter and make a difference to how you respond. It's important to interpret your BPD person's behaviours benignly. Some behaviours may seem manipulative, but it is unlikely that they have the controlled emotional skills to actually be deliberately manipulative. As carers, as parents and friends, we need to avoid being burnt out in relating to our BPD person. We sometimes have to draw the line between being enabling and being supportive. You will probably be more supportive to a BPD person to other family members, but you don't want to be an enabler. That is where you are doing things for them that they really should do for themselves. And if you don't let them take on responsibilities that they can manage, then you stifle their ability to grow towards independence. However, sometimes a task seems manageable to you, is for them more likely to be an emotional block rather than an actual inability to do the task.
So, for instance, simple tasks like catching a bus, putting petrol in the car, or doing the grocery shopping will be well within the physical abilities of a BPD person, but they are paralysed by the fear that they will somehow do it incorrectly, and this will result in them being publicly humiliated. Fear, embarrassment, and shame are powerful emotions for many people with BPD. So it is appropriate to help them do these tasks several times over until their fear is overcome and they are emotionally comfortable on their own. Believe me, this sort of response is far better than invalidating them by saying something like, grow up and just do it.
Every person's limits are different and they can change over time. There is a need to find a balance between our loved ones' needs and our own.
So a money lending limit could well be affected by job circumstances. For instance, COVID, what we're going through now, may have reduced a carer's work hours. So your capacity to actually lend money to your BPD person may now be significantly lower, and a new limit will have to be observed.
So how do we know when our limits are being challenged? Well, we may become resentful of the things we do for them. We begin to feel under a lot of pressure. We start to feel we are losing our self-respect, and we are compromising too much. And this all equals burnout. If not addressed, burnout can lead to being judgmental and damages the relationship with your BPD person. And so what behaviours might be testing our limits?
So examples taken from Family Connections classes that we've run. I'll give you 4. It may be phone calls that come through to you in the middle of the night. It might be getting 30 or more texts every day. It could be smoking in your house, or it could be leaving food to rot in their messy bedrooms.
So how do we face these difficult situations? By observing our limits. We do this by looking at how these behaviours affect us.
So the phone calls in the middle of the night wake me up and I end up sleeping poorly. I'm so tired and worn out. I can't relax, with the text. I can't relax knowing that another text will be coming soon. It totally disrupts what I'm doing during the day. The house smells of stale smoke and I hate it. I don't want to attract rats and other vermin into our house.
Then how can we shape acceptable behaviours that protect our limits?
So the first thing is you must always validate their feelings or their wishes, but still establish your limits. So with the phone calls, you could say, phone calls are okay between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m, but no later. You might negotiate the number of texts that is acceptable to you to receive and between certain hours. Smoking outside in the garden, that's fine, but not in the house. Once a week, I'll go into your bedroom and clean out any food unless you do that yourself. This hopefully will challenge the privacy that they expect for their own room.
Finally, we have to learn to say no. We can still validate the feeling and say no. Going back to the reduction of household income due to COVID, your limit may now be 0. So you will have to say no for all requests for money. You may be wondering, how are the limits effectively observed? This comes in later modules in Family Connections, where you are provided with great detail, strategies for negotiating with your BPD person, the limits you want observed by them. As with all things in Family Connections, when it's a matter of safety, the situation that cannot be condoned or tolerated. Through this process, you will begin to gain more self-respect, become less judgmental, and be more effective in your relationship with your BPD person. Thanks.
Back to you, Jenny.
I keep forgetting to unmute myself. Okay, so Ruth's got a question here. Is it invalidating to make a rule where you won't allow your BPD person from using services such as Uber because they don't have a great sense of safety awareness? I think that falls into a limit and depending on their age, I guess.
Yes, yeah, there'd be all sorts of circumstances around it, but the key point in Family Connections is that if it is a matter of their safety or your safety, then it's a non-negotiable. The limit is a non-negotiable.
It might be around 2, then are you prepared to pick them up?
Yeah, yep.
And then there might be a limit around what time are you prepared to pick them up?
Exactly. Yep.
It's something that has to be negotiated, I would think. There'll be a bit of toing and froing.
And what you would validate in that circumstance might be, I can appreciate that you want your independence.
Yep.
And I can appreciate that all your friends use it, or, and I can appreciate that it feels, that you're getting treated differently from other people your age. And this is a requirement, and I'm prepared to pick you up up until X o'clock.
Yeah.
You got anything on that?
Liz, any other questions?
There's none on that. Where do you want me to go? Do you want me to just pick out some other questions? There's lots of questions general questions about waiting times for Family Connections and availability and where they are. So I've sent an earlier response suggesting that people contact NEA and get an email Kylie, and she can tell them. You can also see on the NEA site where groups are running. But so much of the difficulty is we don't have enough leaders. Leaders can be people who are clinicians or practitioners working with people with BPD, and they can be carers who have completed a Family Connections program. And then they need to do the leader training. So that's a bit of a process. So we need lots more people. And we don't have very many in rural areas at all. So for those people, they need to request to do an online group.
Liz, someone's just asked, what's NEA mean?
Oh, National Education Alliance -BPD. It's not a very intuitive name, but we spring from the American organisation of the same name, which is there's Family Connections that's being run in about 25 countries. So we're just part of that larger organisation, hence the name. I did send a link earlier on in the chat. You can probably find it there. So how to contact for Family Connections. And I also put a link to the form if you would like to register to do a program. But we just suffer like all other organisations. We're under-resourced, we rely on volunteers, and we don't have enough groups running. But it is building slowly.
Is it worth mentioning there are resources online and things like that?
Oh yes, of course, yes. Okay, so I'll put some other links up for you.
Yeah. There's some questions around alcohol, and you know, like here in Western Australia, there's great organisations like Hollyoak and Palmerston, and they also run carer groups. So for that specific stuff around substance use and substance abuse, there are some really fantastic carer groups out there. I can only talk to WA, I'm sorry.
But I think, and here it says, how do I validate no alcohol? So validating that you don't want the use of alcohol, I'm guessing.
Serving a limit, yeah, I would think you'd be. I think that's that's right.
And you can validate. There is always something to validate. It's not the behaviour necessarily. It is their emotion. It's their feeling. It's what there's always. If you can find, like Jenny was saying, she was on the phone to her friend thinking, what can I validate here? What is in here that I can validate? It's finding that kernel of truth for them. Even if you don't agree with it, you are validating their emotion, their feeling, their wants. That's it. Like Tom, and I'm finding this more with a small child, but he's wanting to put rocks into the drain outside. So I validate he wants to do that, but I'm not letting you do that. You know, I know you want to do that, and I know it's frustrating that I'm not letting you, but you're not doing it. So just even in that smaller example, I'm finding that I'm validating, but rather than, no, you can't do that, I'm validating what is valid for him, and he really wants to put those rocks in the drain.
That's it. Next slide. So just
any other questions
before we go into sorry, I've got so many screens open here. I'm a bad screen driver.
That's a judgment, Jenny.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. See how useless that is, because as soon as I put the judgment there, I got flustered. So mindfully, okay, I'm just being a little slower than I'd like to be on sharing my screen. So just because we've got 8 minutes left. Here we go. So we do run on volunteer-powered donations and goodwill. We only have 2 people that are sort of working on it between them full time, and neither of them are full time. So the rest of us are just doing what we can when we can. Donations would mean that we could fund more Family Connections leader training, which, as you can hear, we really need. Admin support, our website, and awareness raising such as this webinar and other activities. The other thing that we are, like in states where we can gather now, you know, during lockdown, we all shifted to doing the groups online, and I've only run one group online. There is a big difference between doing it online and in person, and you know, in person there are richer connections, but you know, if Zoom's all that's on offer, and certainly for regional areas, in many cases it is all that's on offer, that we certainly will be doing more of that. But if you work in a workplace that wants to get involved in the community and they can make a meeting room available in an evening or something like that, even that is really helpful for us. So yeah, we definitely need support as you need support. That's the link to make a donation. So before we end, shall we just see what other questions are happening? Is there any else?
Someone has asked, isn't there another leader training being run by Alan Frusetti later this month? Yes, but you need to register to attend that. And as I said before, you either need to be a practitioner with experience working with people with BPD or a carer who's done the Family Connections 12-week program.
And been tapped on the shoulder for that.
Yes, yeah.
Is it worth making the point that many BPD sufferers also have comorbidities?
Yes, I've mentioned that in the chat a bit.
Especially anxiety and depression.
Yes.
And their dysregulation is much worse if they're not being effectively medicated for those comorbidities.
Yep. Yeah. And we have another webinar on Thursday. You can register on the BPD Australia website. And that one, we've got Andrew Channon and, oh, help, I've gone blank on the other people. Yogi, we've got some excellent clinicians talking on treatments and the latest research for BPD.
There is somebody who's asked, I was hoping there would be advice in self-harm, suicidal thoughts and relationship difficulties in an adult with BPD. So any comments for that?
My comment to that would be, it's not possible to answer that sort of complexity tonight, but I reckon if they could get into a Family Connections program face-to-face, they're definitely the sorts of things that are teased out and we discuss like quite in depth. You know, you really are allowed to have your turn every week to talk about your personal experience. And so you really can, I think, resolve some of those issues sort of as you go along. So the face-to-face, I mean, obviously if you can't Zoom, but getting into a group and going through the program, I think really does help in those particular cases. Because we do discuss those things. We do discuss those more serious issues. We do.
Yeah.
But it also does require clinicians' involvement when you're dealing with very serious aspects like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And look, try and find the carer organisations in your state. So in Western Australia, we have Helping Minds, which is specifically for mental health carers. And we have Carers WA, which is carers for any chronic condition. There are, BPD Foundation has a great list of resources as well, but getting some counselling for you specifically as a carer is a good idea.
Yep, through Carer Gateway. They offer 6 free counselling sessions per calendar year, I think. Yeah. And
it's Sanctuary
yes,
South Australia is leading the way in terms of
we have about 400
community support. BPD.
And we've been running meetings online due to COVID, and we've found that people from other states and country towns have joined us. So anyone is welcome to do that. So I posted the Sanctuary website early in the chat. If you can't find it, there it is. It's at 7:14 p.m. But if you can look up Sanctuary BPD Carer Support Group online, you'll find it.
So the Carer Gateway, you could just search that online, and they were doing telephone counselling, but I think they're now doing face-to-face. I don't know what's happening in Victoria, but certainly in South Australia, they're doing face-to-face counselling. Yeah. But if you're in a country area, you could avail yourself of a phone counselling service. Yeah.
And I'm not sure when the next New South Wales group is going to run, but we do have people in New South Wales that are trained as leaders. So I think, everything got held back by COVID, really.
No, there's a question, is Sanctuary in Western Australia? No, Sanctuary is actually the name of the carer organisation in South Australia. Jenny, you said, I can't remember what you said, the
Helping
name.
Minds.
Healthy Minds, yeah.
Helping Minds and Carers WA are the two.
Yep, yep. Yep.
They're the two that are here.
And just in terms of the counselling, I think it's really important that you actually ask for a counsellor that knows about BPD.
Yes.
It's really that's skilled in BPD or knows the issue.
Yeah, that's definitely
makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, look, I hope we're getting some lovely comments, and you know, I think in closing, you know, we do recognise how very difficult it is for you, and you know, the three carers that we have here tonight have been through it and have seen their relationships improve. So there is hope. And I can say as a clinician that I like working in this space because you can make a difference, and you can make a really big difference, because all that emotional sensitivity, when it gets channeled in the right way, can be an incredibly powerful force. I'm a horse rider, and I haven't ridden in years, but I love horses. And I think of it like their emotional system is like an Arab pony, and it is a wild and rough ride if you don't have a saddle or a bridle and it hasn't been trained. But you know, when people get the skills either through DBT or other BPD oriented treatment options, then they have, you know, there's still an Arab pony that's going to bolt and kick and, you know, try and get you off. But if you've got, you know, a bridle and you've got a saddle and you've got skills and you know how to ride, then, you know, it's all going to be good at the end of the day. I don't know, Kirsty, is there?
Yeah. And I work with people, in the mental health system with BPD. And then by doing this, I just see how even if the person with BPD isn't in treatment, but just how much change can happen if, like Liz was saying, you know, you get skilled up yourself. You can use these in other relationships. It helps with all relationships. But I just see this is what keeps me going. I see change in both sides and understanding. I think there's a lot of psychoeducation in Family Connections, and we do talk a lot about what BPD is, and even because there's so much inaccurate information out there, or people just don't have enough. So once you do have that solid understanding of what BPD actually is and what the traits look like, the criteria, then the empathy and the understanding, like you were saying, Denise and Michael, you can't help but not feel for them. And if we felt that way, I mean, just what a life, like how difficult it is. And we're always telling them to get better, telling them to improve, but, you know, just really walking in their shoes, thinking about it for a moment, how incredibly difficult would that be? So, yeah. As well, there's a lot of good that can come in this space, and a lot of change can happen. So it's been really useful to see that it's been well liked by people, and there's been some definite things I've enjoyed about this tonight.
I want to say there's many questions we haven't been able to answer. We're sorry about that, but use the resources that you have in each state. I've sent a number of links, and if you haven't got them, Google it and find out. There's always somebody you can talk to somewhere in your state that can help you with general answers to questions, but Family Connections is the program where you will get the skills and see change happening. And like any skill, it takes a lot of practice. Each one does.
And I'm going to, sorry to interrupt, just one last screen share is on the NEA BPD US site. Come on, share. So this is the website here. There is a series of videos that open your mind before you open your mouth series. And these were made by an Irish organisation to go with the 6 modules of BPD, of the Family Connections program. And the longest one is about 20 minutes. Some of them are only 10, 11 minutes. And they're really fantastic because they show you examples of a family interaction and of a family interaction minus validation, with everybody getting dysregulated together, to then the same interaction when someone brings in some validation and brings in some limit setting. And so if you can't get into a group for a while because our wait list is long, then, you know, you can sort of get an introduction to some of these skills in this video series. So I am going to put that in chat. But even if you just Googled open your mind before you open your mouth, you might find your way to it.
And Lauren said the webinars on the US NEA BPD site are excellent as well.
Yes, yes, the same. So you can see the link that I've just put in the chat. It's borderlinepersonalitydisorder.org and the video series. And in there, there's just loads and loads of resources on the US side. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that. I think we have to finish. I'm sorry for all the questions that haven't been answered, and I'm sorry for the suffering that you're experiencing at the moment, but hopefully you can get some help, and don't stop asking for it, you know, and don't, if you get a whiff of judgmentalism from a clinician that's meant to be helping you, find another one.
Yeah, because there's a lot out there that do want to help, but there also, as you've all experienced, I'm sure, a lot that there is still that stigma. But don't take no for an answer. Like keep trying, like Jenny said, try someone else.
Yeah, because there are people out there that like it.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anyone?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, I guess we have to go. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was good to be part of it.